Hello folks, welcome to this edition of City View. I'm proud to be your mayor, Mayor Tom Koch, and it's that time of year. Some of you that may have tuned in previous years. First Monday of May is the time when the Mayor and Chief Executive Officers submit to the City Council the annual municipal budget. And just this past Monday night we did that before the 9-member City Council. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about it today on this show and go through some of the detail, if you will. As always, if you have any questions or concerns you want to get to me, you certainly can email me at the office. You can call our office. You can visit our office, and we'll try to respond. We will respond and try to answer any questions or concerns you may have. So I'm going to work with you. I'm going to go back and forth to the computer screen here, and those that know me are going to be quite impressed because this isn't usually my thing. But this year's budget, $325 million. Total appropriation. It's about a 4.6% increase over last year. And the reason it's a little bigger than the normal increases is this was the final year on a contractual agreement with all the unions, 5-year deals that they had 1% in the early years, and this year the final year is a 3%. And the biggest increase department-wise has gone to the Quincy Public Schools, our education department. That's a $5.2 million increase. Outside of public safety, there's nothing more important we do than educate the children of our city. So, and the public safety education and benefits about 80% of the budget. So it's the budget, though it's new every year to the City Council we submit. It's not brand new. There are tweaks, obviously. There's some program changes here and there, and the numbers change a little bit. But in essence, we have a number of city departments that have a mission. You know, obviously the schools educate our children, police and fire, public safety. We have inspectional services, they're also public safety, Department of Public Works, Department of Natural Resources, our libraries, our veteran services, our council on aging, and then of course a number of offices in City Hall that deal with assessing, treasurer collector, city clerk, all play an intricate role in coming together as one body as a municipality that serves you, the public, in all the needs. So. I think it's a very responsible budget. I also think the budget truly reflects the values of our community. We have a city with a long tradition of providing great services to the people of our city, and I think we're head and shoulders out of any municipality, particularly cities our size, in responding to need and providing the services that people expect and deserve each and every day. This graph here shows a little bit about the old pie chart, if you will. And it kind of shows the significance of the education budget. This shows that pie of 34% for education budget of the total budget. But when you add up all those other areas that contribute to education, for example, the health benefits for our teachers and staff, the grounds that our park department does, the public buildings department does a lot of work in our school buildings. When you add that up, it's around 50% of the budget really is dedicated to our schools. So that's a good thing. We have outstanding school system, and I should mention that recently the state just recognized the Quincy Public Schools for a city for having the lowest dropout rate. And they're actually coming in to our school system to review the policies, the programs, and how we do it to share with other school systems. And I think that's so flattering for our school system. So my hat's off to our entire system, my colleagues in the school committee, but talk to Christopher, the leadership team, our principals, staff, teachers, you name it, all that come together to work so hard to provide a great education. And we do it well here in Quincy. Our class size is small. It's a great school system. Public safety departments are well staffed, both the fire and police. All the companies are back in service, including Rescue One. We have 13 sector cars that are out on a regular basis, police cruisers, if you will. Great leadership in both departments. I'm grateful to Chief Keenan, the police, and Chief Cadigan on the fire, their staffs and personnel. They really work hard every day. Our response time as a community is outstanding, and I think that's important. And I know certainly people depend on that, so they shouldn't have to worry about calling 911 and not having a quick response. And then, of course, we got other categories. You got human services, we got infrastructure management. Infrastructure management will be really Public Works, Department of Natural Resources, and all the work they do in maintaining our roads, our streets, our seawalls, our parks, our urban forest, a lot of pieces to infrastructure, as well as all of our public buildings. There's more than 80 public buildings. So debt service, that's when we borrow to do projects. when you add up the offsets that we have in the budget, the debt service is about 5.2%, which is pretty healthy for a city our size. So again, another slide here, the education budget, and maintain class sizes. They're very healthy class sizes. Elementary school, on average, they're probably 16 or 17 kids. It's really a good system, and I appreciate, again, the priority of my colleagues in government to keep it that size. Also want to add the green program in our schools. So we had a visit a few weeks back from a number of folks concerned about some environmental issues and composting, and they raised specifically on the school side the use of styrofoam on the lunch containers that the kids get. And I agreed with them. It's time we move on from that. It's a little more costly, but you know what? It's more environmentally friendly. It's the right thing to do. So that's part of this new budget, along with meeting the needs of the classroom. 2020 priorities. And I talked about this the other night. Less than, I guess it's 1/5 of 1% of a budget are anything new programs and new personnel. I mean, the budget is essentially the same as previous years as far as the outline goes. The numbers change year to year. So a $14 million total increase, only $700,000 really accounts for new spending. Examples of that, we're adding to our Department of Natural Resources an earth scientist, as well as a tree warden to help us provide the right services to the residents, but also to really take it to a whole nother level, maintaining our urban forest. We have a lot of hundreds of acres of marshland. We've got ponds like Sailor's Home Pond, Butler's Pond, and rather than responding every so often to a need, I'd rather be proactive, and I think by adding these positions at Natural Resources, it's going to make a big difference in us maintaining our environmentally sensitive areas, so that's a good thing. In addition, in the Department of Natural Resources budget, we're adding this year $200,000, so a total of $300,000 for an annual tree planting program. Now that $300,000, the good news is it comes out of the hotel tax. It doesn't come out of your property tax. And over the years, we've lost a lot of urban forest, and that's due to a lot of things. Salt we use on the roadways, compaction, limited space for the planting of the trees. The utility companies at times butcher the trees up on the top. Urban pollution in general. So we've got to be more vigilant and more aggressive tree planting in the right places. Again, David Murphy, our Commissioner of Natural Resources, is going to be entertaining and trying in a pilot program in a couple of streets, actually planting trees on the back of sidewalk. For those folks that will be cooperative, we can plant some nice, beautiful, ornamental type trees in neighborhoods on the front lawn of people's yards out toward the sidewalk portion. That would go a long way in helping it. Gets it off of the salt spray, gets it from under the wires they have to cut. So it's another program. We talk a lot about global warming, or I shouldn't say we, but society. A lot of leaders, scientists talk about it on a regular basis. Government officials are talking about it. Whatever the cause may be, there's definitely something happening to our environment, and one of the most responsible things we can do is plant more trees. Trees breathe in all the crap that we produce, quite frankly, not a good word, I guess, and then they breathe out oxygen for us to breathe. I mean, they're like a cleanser of a filter, if you will, of the air, so the lungs of a city. So we're going to be, over the next several years, committing to far more money on our tree planting. I think it was attributed to an old Indian chief that you don't plant trees for your children, you plant trees for your grandchildren's children, because it takes a long time for a tree to mature. Public safety, we're adding 2 new patrol officers, so we're almost up about 20 new patrol officers since I took office. I committed to that when I ran, that we would grow the drug unit, that we would grow the department as the city grows. A few years ago, we added substantially to the fire department, which brought our pieces all back into service. So I think we're in a good place. As I said earlier, the response time in this city is pretty reasonable. It's darn good. There's also some incremental growth in our emergency management department. We learned from last spring's floods down in Adams Shore and Howes Neck that we really weren't as prepared as we ought to be with sheltering. So this is going to take a real good look with a study and coming up with a plan on sheltering to try to use a couple of private facilities, for example, Salvation Army's in our city. They've got facilities built in, rather than our schools, because what happens is when you reopen the schools for the kids, you can't have folks that shouldn't be in a school building during school hours. It doesn't work. So we learned from that, Ali Sleeman, our new director, he's focused specifically on emergency management. Used to be part of the fire department. They had a lot of other duties. So I think the focus on this would be great. It's going to update our plan going forward. And as we've seen over the last few years, we've had some challenges since I've been mayor, whether it was the West Quincy flooding, whether it was the winter from hell from winter 15, or whether it was the crazy storms that we experienced last year. 22 priorities, and another new position that we're adding is to our Council on Aging, our elder services. We have a great trans van program where we transport people to their medical appointments. In some cases, we do some shopping for those that are homebound. I've learned from other department heads that there are times they come in contact with seniors or a senior that may be a little confused, a little mixed up, that need some help, they need some guidance. And we really don't have right now somebody that actually goes and visits somebody in the home. So I think this is a much needed piece to help guide that person through some of the, whether it's paperwork at the assessors because they want to file for an abatement, or the social worker may then be able to observe there's some other issues, and we can get the senior the help they need. So I think that's a good one. We're adding another civil engineer to our engineering division of Public Works because of all the work we have going on in the city. We've got 100 roads that are going to be touched this year, either water mains, gas mains, or asphalt reconstruction. So this is a position that's needed by that. We're adding to our school department and our rec department. We're taking some money that comes in from the host agreement on the marijuana dispensary for the medical marijuana, and we're adding $100,000 to recreation, $100,000 to schools for after-school programming. So the rec side will be more recreational. The school side will be more enrichment, arts, music, and other programs for kids after school. One of the things that I was taught a long time ago and learned from my father, who started the Koch club, was really about giving kids a chance to do things, to keep them busy, get them off the corners. And I think there's an argument for that under the prevention side and what all we're doing in the drug with the epidemic we're dealing with. The younger we can reach them, to keep them busy, get them interested in whether it's arts, music, recreation, whatever it may be, I think will go a long way. It's tough to measure your success because you don't know who might have fallen into that trap if we hadn't had these programs. So we're building on what we have, and I think that's a good thing. We're transitioning our tourism from the Chamber of Commerce back to the city. There's no impact on the city budget. That's all funded by the hotel tax, which was enacted many years ago. And this year we're creating a start of a new department that's being paid for from the money out of the taxes in the downtown. I've talked about that a million times on the show and on our podcast, that we have what's called the DIF district, District Improvement Financing, and we're allowed to take new taxes coming out of that dedicated back to the downtown. So it saves you from paying for anything in the downtown. So now that we've got the new Hancock Adams Common, a new garage is going to be coming on line sometime in September. All these facilities are going to need to be maintained on a regular basis. So we're going to get the right expertise in to do that, and again, be paid for out of the taxes in the downtown. In addition, we're creating a reserve fund in the DIF that, should we have any challenges down the road in paying our bond, money will be there to do that. I don't think we need it. It's what we refer to as belts and suspenders, having that extra. And then some trends. When I first started in office, the snow and ice budget was $300,000, which wasn't a drop in or a hole in the snowbank, if you will, for really what we're spending. But it was that way for 20 years. Is probably more accurate. And the reasons the mayor hadn't got up on that is because you can overspend the snow budget and then figure it out later, whether through surplus or whether through just adding it onto the tax rate. It's something you can spend without council approval. But each year we've been adding incrementally to that budget. And this year we actually had $500,000 in surplus. Wasn't that bad a winter, and that's why we had the surplus. So we decided to just level fund it, so we're not going up this year on the snow and ice. That's the first time in my 12 years we're not going up on the snow and ice. The sewer and water enterprise funds, as you know, you all pay a water bill, which includes a sewer charge on it. The department, Commissioner Grazioso and his team have done a great job in finding those leaks in the system that are unaccounted for, but you still pay for the water, because we pay the MWRA. All that water is measured when it comes into our system in Quincy, and it's measured when it goes out to be treated at the sewer end of things. So, it's imperative that we lower as best we can that unaccounted for water. When you have underground leaks, you don't know you have them. So we have to pay for that water. So we've reduced that It was more than 32%. I think we're down in the 15% range, and we'll continue to drive that down. In addition, we did a lot of work to the sewer mains along the coast. Fred Lasky, who's the director of the MWRA, called me a few years ago and said, "Hey, Mayor, you know, we're treating a lot of seawater at the treatment plant, which tells us seawater is getting into our sewer lines." So we immediately began the engineering work, looked at a number of our areas, and did a lot of relining. So if you've driven out to Squantum, for example, the causeway, you'll see these big manholes sticking up out of the marsh with a manhole cover on them. Well, that infrastructure of that manhole and where it leads into the pipe, in many cases, some bricks got loose, so there were penetration points in the system. As the tide came in, it would just infiltrate and fill those pipes with seawater. We've repaired all of the coastal ones, and we'll continue to work throughout the system on relining and repairing those. So that, my point is, obviously we're going to maintain infrastructure, but the sewer and water bills this year will be stable. We saw increases for a number of years to deal with the debt at the MWRA, to build Deer Island, to build the Nut Island headworks. All that costs money. Our water is much cleaner. It's really paying dividends to our environment. People fishing again and get on Wollaston Beach for a swim easily, and you can see bottom. Remarkable difference. But the good news is your sewer and water bills should not change much at all, if any. The other thing we're doing, we continue to add to our stabilization fund, which is some call it a rainy day account, but we actually have funding each year out of the regular budget. $250,000 in reserve and $250,000 in what's called the OPEB fund, which is called Other Public Employee Benefits. So when somebody retires, they carry health benefits with them. We're building a trust fund so that down the road, that's not an unfunded liability that the city faces. So anyway, that sums up that page and some of the trends. Our debt, you know, we talk a little bit about this from time to time. We borrow money when we do projects. I think people take a second mortgage on their home, or they borrow money, a personal loan or whatever, to do things on their homes. It's no different than a city. We don't have the cash reserves to necessarily put all new roofs and boilers and things in buildings. A lot of people don't have the cash reserve when they have to do a roof in their house. So it's the same idea. So we borrow money to do that. The economy is so good, borrowing money is very cheap. So we're able to stretch the dollar pretty dramatically for a number of our projects. For example, our Southwest Middle School is going to be, the first phase is going to open on June 3rd. So our kids are going to move into the old Sterling, from the old Sterling into the new Southwest. And then in October, we'll have a grand opening when the old building will be down, all landscape will be finished, and it'll be a very good day. My point is, when we borrow money, we borrow in two categories: bond anticipated notes, which is short-term borrowing. And then when the project is done and we know exactly what the total was, we then put it out for bid for long-term debt. And it goes out, in some cases, 30 years. We follow the law on that. Some cases 25 years, some cases 20 years. But many cities and towns, their ratio is 8 to 10% of their budget. We're at 5.2% after you do the offsets with the hotel tax. For example, a lot of park work that we did, we borrowed money for. That's being paid for, those bonds, by the hotel tax. The downtown, all that work we're doing, the borrowing we're doing gets paid back from the taxes in the downtown. Phenomenal tools in the tool chest for us to get this stuff done. And you're the beneficiary of it. People talk about, when I first got elected, you got to do something about that downtown. Well, it's happening. And this beautiful new public spaces that you're going to be able to enjoy, a lot of great restaurants, and hopefully we're going to be adding some retail shops as we continue to build it out. So my point is we're in good shape on our borrowing. Short-term debt, we borrowed this past year for roads and pipes, and we're going to touch 100 streets this year in various ways. But over the next 3 or 4 years, there's going to be a major concentration on getting our roads back in shape, and I'm sure you're happy about that, as am I. So we're maintaining a AA plus rating from a bond rating agency. So what happens is every time we go to borrow money, we have to get rated by one of the rating agencies, Standard & Poor or Moody's. And they actually, there's a million questions. They actually follow everything going on in the city. They know what we're doing when we're asking for money before the council. They keep clipping files from the newspaper on what's happening. So they have a lot of very pointed questions about what's going on before they assigned our rating. Now, we've increased the rating since I've been mayor. So there's only a few cities that have a higher rating than Quincy in Massachusetts. we're in a very good place. So when you borrow, the higher your rating, when you borrow money, you get a better rate. So it saves us an awful lot of money when you do that. So we have a lower debt ratio than most cities and towns. And the last report that Standard & Poor did, their quote, strong budgetary performance, strong budgetary flexibility, and low overall net debt. They rewarded us with the AA+. The other thing that they ask me during those things, because there's some people that say that I spend too much money. Now, I'm not going to the Bahamas. The money we're spending is on city buildings, city streets, seawalls, pipes, all infrastructure that we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We're an old city with old infrastructure. We got to do these things. So it's a great time to be doing these things because we're borrowing money at a very, very low rate. I'd be irresponsible if we weren't doing these things. And I'd also add that we're getting great school building authority reimbursements for our schools. We're getting federal and state grants for pump stations and seawalls. So we're stretching the dollar pretty dramatically. Governor Baker and our legislative delegation has been phenomenal. Congressman Lynch, with the support of Senators Markey and Warren, have been helpful. So, we're really, really chasing the dollar to get our city up to standards. So I think that's just worth noting. So we're in good shape on the debt side. Revenue side, as most people probably know, because most people in the city are paying property taxes, 75% of our revenue comes from the property tax. Now, it may vary a little from city and town. For example, a place like Lawrence gets a lot more money from the state because they struggle as a city. Every city and town gets some kind of local aid from the state, general local aid, and they also get Chapter 70 money to help us with education. Now, that number is not as robust as it used to be. So right now, our state aid is 14% of our budget. When I first took office, it was almost 20%. And then local receipts would be the other one, the 11%. Local receipts are when you pay excise tax on your car vehicle or when you get for a marriage license, baptism, not baptism, that would be your parish. Death certificate, any of those types of general government fees, building department fees, that drops into the local receipt category. So that makes up the total pie of what we have for revenue to then build our budget on. So property tax, I know it's always a tricky one. I was at actually a meeting this morning down in Germantown, meeting with veterans, and a woman asked me, with all this building going on, why aren't our taxes going down? I want to point a couple of things out. And I'll go back the last 2 years. The last two fiscal years, 18 and 19, the Braintree average single family went up $367. Weymouth went up $331. The average state increase was $417. Quincy was $217. Our main driver for revenue is the property tax. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because it gets a little complicated. Our total levy across the city, we're allowed to go up 2.5% each year under the law. That's not your individual bill. That would be the total assess we have across the city. Under state law, we're allowed to go up 2.5% a year. We don't do that. Most communities are at the levy limit, meaning they have very little flexibility. In fact, I'll give two examples. Last year, the city of Somerville had a Proposition 2.5 override to build a high school. Now, what does that mean? That means the voters had to vote to increase the taxes on themselves to be able to build that high school. Just the last few weeks in the town of Weymouth, and it's not a criticism, it's just reality here, folks. They had an override to build one middle school. So they voted to tax themselves higher because they had no room in 2.5. They're taxed at the max right now, and then they're going more to build that middle school. Folks, we're finishing our third brand new school. We're building seawalls. We're repairing buildings. We're fixing roads and infrastructure, all within our tax levy. And we have $31 million in excess levy capacity. What does that mean? That means I am leaving $31 million on the table that we're not taxing to the homeowners. Now, I know that sounds a little flip. I could be taxing you more, but we don't. That's the reality. We don't tax to the max. We understand the sensitivity of people trying to stay in their homes and the bills they have, but you also have to balance that with the needs of the city. There's people that have kids in the school, that's all they care about. I ran into a guy, I've told the story before, but an old timer who was long retired. He said, when can I stop paying for schools? My kids are all grown. Why should I pay for schools? I said to him, how many kids did you have? He said 9. I said, did they go to the Quincy Public Schools? He said, all of them. I was proud of that. I said, well, you won't live long enough to pay for what it costs per kid to be in the school system. So see, folks, it's important to understand we're all in this together. whether you're using services at the senior center, whether you've got a kid in the schools, whether you're using the libraries, whether you use the parks, it all comes together, it all comes into that one big pie that we work out on how we spend and how we prioritize, and that tax money is important. But all of this new growth we're experiencing, all this new development, that's what's allowing us to do these things. It's keeping the taxes very, very manageable. They're slight to modest, quite frankly, and it allows us to get all these programs done, which we need to do. There's no question about it. So, you know, some of the other challenge we have is our property tax issue is the values on properties. A single-family home has gone up dramatically in value. It's another issue I like to point out. So last year, $120 tax increase. The average single-family value went up $37,000. Now, most people aren't selling their home right now, but for most people, your biggest investment is your home. Where could you invest $120 and get a return of $37,000? It's pretty good thing. So again, if you have any specific questions in your home and your neighborhood, feel free to call our office, call the assessors department. But overall, I think we've managed things in that regard pretty well. I've talked a little bit already about the excess levy capacity. That's another slide here. The capital requests we've added, each year we have what we call a 5-year rolling capital improvement program. And this year it's a $10.3 million program that's going to have a number of improvements to buildings. For example, the new Quincy High, we have to replace 3 boilers already. It's been 5 years, and the warranty's up. We've got to replace them. We have 82 municipal buildings, and they all need something, whether it's roof, windows, pipes, ADA upgrades with some of our schools, technology improvements with our IT. We're getting new breathing apparatus for fire department. That's about $800,000, which is going to make it safer for the men and more efficient in the job. We're getting new police cruisers and other resources with the police department. So every year we try to have an increase or a new item in the capital 5-year rolling program to address the needs. And that changes from year to year. We have a long-term plan, but sometimes you can't predict some of the needs. There's some money to improve some intersections, and there's also money in there for some equipment. So, you know, that's kind of sums it up, the total budget. Again, there's copies at the library. You can go online and look at it in more detail if you want. The City Council in the next few weeks are going to hold public meetings at the Council Chamber, headed up by the Finance Chairman, Councilor Ian Kane. And every department will go up and defend their budget and answer questions of the City Council. Certainly, if you go to the city's website, I'm sure those meeting dates are up there. But again, anytime we can be of help in answering some of the questions that you may have, we'll do that. Feel free to contact our office. Hope it's helpful for you to understand how your local government works and how your tax dollars are spent. I know, folks, no one likes to pay taxes. But in reality, that's how we fund things. That's how we keep our quality of life up. And I'm proud of this budget. I think it reflects the values of our city. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch the show. See you next time on City View. God bless.